So is Detroit America's most underrated art city? Yes, Detroit. So I mentioned it in my podcast last week. Art is one of my area of focus this summer. And beyond gallery openings, museum visits, artist talks, I recently joined up an art trip to Detroit. Yes, Detroit. And let me tell you, it was absolutely fantastic. And the secret weapon, behind this experience was our fabulous organizer. Her name is Mia Nielsen of Nielsen and Company. And she had unparalleled access. And she also have a deep knowledge of the local scene and years of experience navigating the city. So she really made the trip, which could have been just a, simple cultural getaway, into something that was truly exceptional. And the group itself was another highlight. And people were engaged, they were curious, they were fun, and genuinely lovely people. We also even had a little mascot, Wolfie, the mini husky, who got everyone wrapped around his little paw. And beautiful weather. If you follow me, you know I love the sun. So the result really was 3 days that felt less like a trip and more like a summer camp for art lovers. Like I came back fully energized, inspired, but also already plotting my next excursion. So what did surprise me the most when I was in Detroit? So before coming, I expected a city that was rebuilding itself. And what I found was actually a city that was quietly building one of the most interesting art ecosystems in North America. The quality of the artists was nothing short of extraordinary and not great for Detroit, great, period. Amazing people. And several artists we visited have national and international careers. They have representation in New York, they have museum placements, they have established collector bases, but many of them choose to live and work in Detroit. So you might be asking, why did someone choose to work in Detroit and not, New York or Los Angeles? That is very simple because in Detroit, contrary to New York, London, Toronto, and anywhere in between, artists can still afford space. And space matters, space allows for experimentation, for failure, but also it allows artists for taking the time to make art versus figuring out how to pay rent. Obviously, the more expensive the rent, the more challenging it is to live just on your art. So with low rent, that allows artists to focus with less stress, even if it's less stressful, in terms of money. So many of the studios that we visited would be simply unimaginable in New York, Paris, London, Toronto, vast space, industrial spaces, filled with, large work, installation, a lot of space to think and again experiment. And there was also something else that really struck me, is that the scene felt really organic. Less curated, less performative, less transactional than what I see in large cities. The artists, the collectors, the patrons, the galleries, the supporters, everyone seemed to genuinely be connected to one another and to support each other, have a great time. There was really that feeling of people who were actually building something together rather than, simply participating in an industry. So, and while obviously the affordability of Detroit is a very important role, it would be a mistake to think that just that made the ecosystem. The ecosystem didn't emerge like that on its own. Throughout the city, you have committed collectors, you have philanthropists, patrons that have invested an enormous amount of time, of capital to really help create opportunities for artists and for cultural organizations. So the result really is a community that feels extremely vibrant. That said, Detroit remains one of those places where you need to know where you're going. And so you really need a good Sherpa. We were lucky to have one because it's easy to go without seeing, that art scene. So there is one thing that was very interesting for me, who I've been only once in Detroit 10 years ago, and it was for a conference, is the architecture. So many people associate Detroit with cars, but far fewer associate Detroit with architecture. And actually we should, because the city contains some of the most spectacular Art Deco architecture in North America. You can think about the Fisher Building, the Guardian Building, the Penobscot Building. They're all great reminders of a period where cities built structures not only to function, but also to inspire. So gorgeous style work, intricate sculpture, grand lobbies, details that really, reward your curiosity and the effort you're making in really looking. So, and architecture is only part of the story. Murals are everywhere. And one of my favorite discoveries was the Belt, which is an alley that was transformed into an outdoor contemporary art destination, where the public art and urban renewal really meet in a way that feels authentic rather than manufactured. Even if it's very clean and very maintained, it doesn't really feel artificial. So what we did as well were several artist studio visits, and that is always the highlight of any art trip. You get to see not only the work, but also the person who is behind it. And so we had the privilege of visiting the studios of Marie-Anne Montforton, but also James Benjamin Franklin and Jamea Richmond Edmonds. So beyond the quality of their work, which is really like fabulous, what really struck me with all of them is how thoughtful, intelligent, approachable, and generous they all were. And so each of them had developed a very sophisticated art practice, but they all remain very grounded, deeply grounded, I would say. And the conversation really reminded me why I love contemporary art. Obviously, the artwork matters, but understanding the thinking behind the work and the artist often for me matters even more. So that was absolutely wonderful. We also went to visit some galleries, Library Street Collective, which really is establishing itself as one of the most important contemporary galleries in the Midwest. So we visited Tyrell Winston's exhibition that was called Brotox. And it was, a fun, intelligence, humoristic, I would say, exploration of sports, masculinity, memory, identity. And what really impressed me with his work is the ability to use these familiar cultural references like basketball and all type of sports ball, while actually transforming them into something that's deeply personal. So the work operates at the same time as social commentary, autobiography, cultural critique. So that was pretty cool. Then next door, we went to see Louis Bull and Co. And the exhibition there was The Age of Re-Emergence from Andrew Pequigno. And the exhibition explored more like a migration, displacement, identity, obviously, cultural inheritance, through very beautifully layered composition. So the work felt really relevant right now when questions of belonging and identity, occupy so much of the public conversation. And then we went to Buffalo Prescott, which may have been one of my favorite discoveries, I have to say. It's a part non-profit, part incubator, part community builder. So it exists to support Detroit artists directly through residencies, programming, education, and the quality of the artists represented were remarkable, you know. And it is also something that is very rare. It's an infrastructure that is helping artists build sustainable careers. So not just a one-time residency and goodbye. So that was wonderful. The reason we went early June was because there was the opening night, I would say an extraordinary opening night. And that is one of the privileges of traveling with a very well-connected guide is occasional access, not always, but sometimes to experiences that would otherwise be impossible. And a perfect example was attending the opening of Micheline Thomas exhibition at the Shepherd called Beneath the Moonlight. And we didn't just attend the exhibition, we got a private preview for 30 minutes before the public opening. So that was quite something. And that exhibition is particularly relevant for Micheline Thomas in her practice because she's turning her attention towards representation of Black masculinity. She was always focused on Black femininity, I guess. And so the work still really looks like hers. It's rich, it's layered, it's very seductive visually. But again, it pushes in new territory. But again, same commitment to beauty, agency, representation. And I have to say, experiencing it before the crowds really felt, incredibly special. We also went to the MOCAD, and that was wonderful because we had a guided tour by a board member, Mark Sliman, and the museum had free exhibition on view, and they were great, very complimentary. They spoke beautifully to one another. The first one that I really loved was Carol Harris, this side of the river, and I love textile-based work, so that was really something I enjoyed. The second exhibition was from Martha Misko, and it was called Retail Therapy, and they were installation. And that was very cool, like it was really this idea of exploring, obviously, like the title say, retail therapy, consumer culture, but with humor, with depth, it was very intriguing and thought-provoking at the same time as being pretty, I guess. And then the third exhibition, the largest one, was Detroit Cosmology by Olayemi Dabbles. And this was, at least for me, it felt almost like a lifetime retrospective. And really standing in front of the work, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary historical period through which the artist lived, because he was born in the American South in the 40s. So Dabbles experienced segregation, before building an influential artistic career. And when you consider the obstacles that existed prior to the civil rights era, I mean, his artistic journey feels almost like superhuman. Like the work itself is impressive, but I would say the life behind it, his life, may be even more impressive when you know the context. So that I thought was very, emotional, interesting, but some of the great moments in the trip were also outside traditional art institutions. So we sorry, we toured a site-specific installation that is set in a Detroit apartment. The entire apartment is the installation. It's a project that has evolved since 2008 from a Danish artist, a Danish artist that is named Anders Erwald Ruwald, and very interesting, slightly creepy, it's very dark, but very interesting. And of course, there was something you might know already if you know Detroit a little bit, that is called the Heidelberg Project. It's very legendary. I didn't know about it. It's part public art installation, part social experiment, part neighborhood transformation. And it really remains one, I would say, of the most powerful examples of how art can really reshape a place and our understanding of a place. So, I really left Detroit with a renewed sense of optimism about contemporary art. Not because the city is perfect, not because every gallery was extraordinary, but because Detroit really demonstrates that creative ecosystems still matter. Artists need affordable space, that's for sure. They need patrons, that's for sure. They need community, they need room to experiment. And Detroit has really managed to preserve many of those ingredients, while other cities have gradually priced them away. That is one of the big challenge. So the result over there is an art that really feels alive. It feels authentic, it feels unpretentious, and surprisingly sophisticated. I mean, the quality was really mind-blowing. And so if you love art, architecture, or if you're just curious, I really, really recommend going to Detroit. If it's not yet on your travel list, I recommend you adding it. And thank you so much for watching. And I hope I would have nudged you in the direction of spending 3-4 days in Detroit this summer. Thank you so much. Bye bye.